Alright, here we are. Welcome to another movie review stream. My name is Mark McPherson for movieswithmark.com, twincitiesgeek.com, and filminquiry.com. So we're into February right now, and we've got quite a few films that are coming out. I didn't even manage to get to ones I wanted to cover this week, but the bulk of them I will cover. So what do we got? We're going to cover Captain America: Brave New World, the fourth Captain America film opening this weekend. We'll also cover Love... I just realized I had
we're into February right now, and
that. I just realized I had. Sorry, let me turn that off. Just checking levels there. Oh, that was weird. All right. Sorry, I keep that on the back to keep the chat on. All right, so yeah, we're gonna review Captain America: Brave New World, the fourth the fourth Captain America film. We'll also be reviewing Love Hurts, the latest film with Huy Quan playing a realtor who has to contend with his past in an action comedy. And we'll also be looking at Grafted, a new body horror debuting on Shudder, and as a little bit of a bonus this week, just because spoilers, but none of these films are all that great, I thought we'd talk about Flow as well, which is currently nominated for Best Animated Film, and I think has a shot at the Oscars this year, and will also be debuting on Max this week, on Friday. So, there we go. Yeah, I figured what the echo was. Captain America is just coming out this weekend, so this is an early review. I tend to do early reviews whenever I can. The embargo just dropped today, so if you'd like to see more early reviews like this, be sure to like this video and subscribe to keep up to date on the latest movies. So before we get into Captain America, we'll do a quick check here on the chat. So let's see, I saw Grafted. Scorn says I saw Grafted on Shudder. It has some nice body horror elements. Not as good as Substance though, but still an impressive movie. Yeah, that's spoiler. That's pretty much like my opinion as well. Let's see, Suck said so many John Wick knockoffs. Gotta watch Flow. Yep. Yeah, a little bit of a spoiler there, but yeah, let's we'll dig into it. Like, since most people have seen Love Hurts and most people have seen Grafted and Flow, we'll go straight to the top one here. So, let me get my notes up here. All right, it's fresh in the mind after having seen it last night. I still like to keep my notes on hand. All right, so here we go with Captain America: Brave New World in 3, 2, 1. So Captain America: Brave New World is the fourth Captain America film, and the first one to star Anthony Mackie playing Sam Wilson, who is currently in the role of Captain America. And, for Sam's first big feature film as Captain America, they kind of give him kid gloves. And I think my biggest problem with this film is that I've loved the past two Captain America films, like The Winter Soldier and Civil War. I really love those films, not just because they felt like compelling political thrillers for the themes they wove in there about the shifting politics of the Marvel landscape, but also that it shook it up. Like, it felt like at the end of those films that something massive had changed, and that with the way that people got used to this world of superheroes and supervillains. Not so much with Brave New World, and I think this is probably the biggest problem with the film, is that it wants to be a political thriller, much like the past two Captain America films, but it doesn't quite have the guts or the spine to punch as hard as it should. Which is really quite a shame, because I was looking forward to seeing what more could be done with Anthony Mackie in the role of, Captain America now, which, to his credit, I think he has a decent rapport. I did like how when they introduce him in this film, they show off how, like, he's not a super soldier. Like, he's basically a human who, he's still got the wings from his Falcon gear, and he's got the Captain America shield, but he's not indestructible. He does take damage, he does take hits, but he gets up again even when he keeps getting beaten down, which I kind of liked. I kind of thought, okay, well, maybe they're kind of going to build this up as a bit more of of kind of like a bruised arm action film. And there are some moments where, like, yeah, the stakes are pretty high, where you don't think Sam will get out of a fight. And he's got a pretty good sidekick here of Danny Ramirez playing Joaquin Torres, who will become the new Falcon, and he's pretty much good to go. Like, they're both soldiers, and I like that Sam kind of has like an ease to working with like the military. And yeah, the way that the Joaquin and Sam go back and forth, like it's decent. Like I felt like there wasn't enough of them, but they do have kind of like a bit of a Top Gun vibe going on there between them for a few scenes. There really needs to be more of that. And I think this is the biggest problem with the film, is that there is so much that you could cover with all this material. And it only feels like it's scraping by with just like the bare bones of these various elements. Because like, I mean, like one element that I thought would have been fascinating would be how they brought Carl Lumley back as Isaiah Bradley, who was like a previous black super soldier who was imprisoned and experimented on, and he comes back into the picture. So I thought, okay, maybe they'll be able to build on something more that was established in The Falcon and Winter Soldier about addressing, the hideous history of how America treats marginalized people. And it feels like the film might be going that way. But before we can question that too much, then we've got to have, Sam meeting with the president, who is, at this point in time, is Thaddeus Ross, who was previously known as, like, the Hulk Hunter. He was going to be played by William Hurt, but since he's passed away, now Harrison Ford is stepping into the role. And Ross basically comes to Sam and is like, hey, there's all these developments that are going on, and basically I want you to be like our superhero in charge of helping us save the world. And at the same time, before we can even contemplate that, there's this Manchurian Candidate plot going on about like these sleeper agents and the conspiracy behind trying to find out who's trying to like assassinate the president, and all these hideous secrets revealed. Now, as a political thriller, I think, the problem with like viewing this film as a political thriller is that the best political thrillers feel like they're saying something about the world, and that they're being very reflective, and they give you like a lot more to munch on in the mind. And the problem with Brave New World is that it has all these ingredients that could be interesting to explore, and all of it just basically amounts to like a standard superhero plot of of a villain having a showdown with Captain America. Not to mention, like, too many villains here. Like, how many villains can we even count here? Like, there's Tim Blake Nelson. He comes back. I kind of liked his return as Stearns, who, from the comics is known as the leader. But he's supposed to be this character who's, like, super intelligent. And I thought, okay, that's a good angle, because then he can kind of craft this kind of intricate conspiracy. But the more that you go through the film, the conspiracy becomes a lot simpler, that I think by the time you get to the halfway point, you can not only trace all the simplistic motivations, but also the resolve of how all this is going to work out. So it's not as intricate a thriller as the film makes it seem. And I think a big problem with that is that this film kind of mistakes like the quantity for quality and complexity for compellingness. Because like don't get me wrong, like the direction, it's set up like a political thriller. Like, we're trying to figure out this mystery. There are all these players on the table, including Giancarlo Esposito, who shows up as Sidewinder, who's another assassin. But there's, again, not much time for him. There's all this stuff going on, and that by the time you get to the third act, it just kind of feels limp, and it's just like, it feels like, okay, this was just kind of like a roundabout way of just trying to get to this big fight between Captain America and Red Hulk, which is a neat fight, but like it feels like the stakes were not big enough here to have like some greater implication. Like the big battle in Civil War, like the previous Captain America film, it was exciting because you get to see all those superheroes fighting each other, but at the same time they were also fighting for a difference of ideals and how they wanted to approach like a world of defense, especially when they were being undermined by someone like Ross. Within this film, it's mostly just stopping a Red Hulk. Like, and the greater implications of how this would affect the world are just really not there. Like, it just kind of feels like everything in this film will be easily resolved if just Captain America can punch out enough people, and everything will be back to normal by the end of the day, which is really disheartening for all these Captain America films where the world is still in chaos at the end, and it stresses like a need for Captain America to both question his government more and still try to find a way to defend the Earth. And this film just kind of becomes complacent with just like Sam working in this role within the military, kind of in the same way that it made Sam a bit more complacent during the Falcon and Winter Soldier, because that just kind of like reduced this, like this failing policy of the American government to this kind of like routine do more better speech. And I wish I could say that this film had something more than that, but it kind of doesn't. It just kind of falls on these very simple platitudes where it feels like I said, anything can be solved with just a few punches or a few speeches here and there. To the point where even a few characters just comment like, "Oh, are we just doing speeches now?" And like, yeah, I guess we are. So yeah, it has the look and the feel of a political thriller, but it just doesn't have the thematic heft to kind of like push it through. Not to mention, the film doesn't really feel like it has like the balls to kind of like shake up the Marvel Cinematic Universe the way that the previous Captain America films did. And I think a big problem with that is just is the fact that they try to keep so many of these events in check. Like, I was surprised how many aspects of the MCU they try to weave into this, like just kind of like offhandedly, to kind of push the story along. Like I will say this, for those of you who are getting angry that none of the Marvel films are really addressing the big events that happened in the Eternals, Brave New World does address that. Kinda. It kinda addresses it, and it kinda uses it, but not to a degree where it feels like it's weaving it into this political conspiracy that, that feels like it's playing with. It feels like it's being delicate with the MCU, when it really shouldn't. It should be shaking stuff up. It should be feeling like there is something bigger here, instead of just being this little side story and until we wait till like the next big Avengers crossover event. Like, the Captain America films never quite felt that way to me, but this one did, surprisingly. Not to mention, if you're going to compare this to like political thrillers, because like I said, the best political thrillers are the ones that have an overarching theme to it. Because I'm sure because this film has sleeper agents, it'll get the easy comparison to the Manchurian Candidate. But the thing is, the Manchurian Candidate actually felt like it was trying to say something about the Cold War and the fear of communism, that it was being reflective of our times. Brave New World really doesn't feel reflective of our times. In fact, it feels even more fantastical with how easy it is to like hold this president accountable for the conspiracies that he gets accused of, and how he tries to defend his political career. So it's almost fantastical to that degree, where it really shouldn't. Like, you should feel like it's a political thriller that's punching hard, instead of just being a comic book superhero film that is masquerading as a political thriller. Like, the previous Captain America films were able to do that, but Brave New World just never finds its groove, because it just, like I said, it just keeps mounting all this almost kind of like faux intrigue to kind of like, stage it as a thriller, and all it just amounts to is just another big fight. I didn't even get a chance to talk that much about the other secondary characters, like a Secret Service agent played by Zosha Rakimor, and Shira Haas playing a Ruth, and it's basically because there's so much going on, they barely have anything to do. Most of their role is just debriefing and maybe kicking some butt here and there. So yeah, it's definitely a busy film, especially for being just under 2 hours. But in terms of trying to set itself up as a political thriller, I don't think it does a good job. So, Anthony Mackie deserves more than this, especially Danny Ramirez. I think both of them have a pretty good chemistry there isn't enough of that in this film to like enjoy that buddy dynamic. So it's crowded by a lot of this political thriller staging that just ends up being thematically empty. So yeah, this is definitely the worst Captain America film, for how unwilling, or for how it tries to shake up the political landscape and just really doesn't. So yeah, it's a pretty big misfire for these Captain America films. So, Captain America, the Brave New World will be in theaters this Friday. Check it out if you want. I was debating whether or not to bring it on the review, but it's one of those cases where you get a good director and they're not really equipped, I think, or like, I mean, well, for one, it's got one fairly good director, like Julius Ona, who I know most people are going to jump like, oh, he directed the Cloverfield Paradox, and that wasn't a very good film. But he did direct Loose, which I think did a fairly good job touching into kind of like this psychological angle of politics intersecting with race, that it made me a little more hopeful for this film. But then you look at the writers on this, which is, in addition to Owen others, there's Rob Edwards, Malcolm Spellman, Dallin Mawson, and Peter Glantz. Just too many writers on this trying to make this thriller work, and just it's not there. So yeah, disappointing film. It's better because the director who directed Loose is clearly good at building tension and social commentary. Yeah, and I think since Ona was the director, co-writer, I think there might have been the intention to explore that, but then, like I said, all these other screenwriters got in the room, and they probably forced rewrites to make it both crowded and politically toothless, which it really shouldn't be. It's Captain America. If you really want to hammer home that reflective nature of a political thriller that the last few films did, and yeah, I would not be surprised if this is a case of Ona being held back. So yeah, sad to see. So I would say we're going to a better film, but we'll go to the next film. All right. So let's get to Love Hurts here. It's opening right now, but in time for Valentine's Day, if that's your thing. Okay. I need a little bit more water because I threw out my voice a bit there. All right. So here we go with Love Hurts in 3, 2, 1. So Love Hurts is an action comedy with some romance thrown in. And when I mean romance thrown in, I mean romance thrown in at the last minute by someone who probably forgot that, there was supposed to be a love story here. Because you would think, for a film called Love Hurts, being released around Valentine's Day, there would be some romance. I know the trailers have, prepped everyone to see Huy Quan performing more cool martial arts and, having a little bit of an absurd tongue-in-cheek nature to it. And some of that is there, but wow, Love Hurts is just, it's so disjointed and doesn't really know how to build up a good vibe or flow with its action, because it has a decent staging. I mean, Ki Huy Quan, he's, taking on another role after Everything Everywhere All at Once. He plays Marvin Gable, who is a former hitman who is now working as a happy-go-lucky realtor. He enjoys his life of just, selling homes, and, that's the way that he loves it. But then some hitmen come knocking at his door, and he has to face down his past. Namely, he has to face down two people. One is Rose, played by Ariana Dubois, who arrives as kind of the woman that got away from Marvin. Or rather, the woman that Marvin let go, he was supposed to kill her, and he just kind of lets her go because he kind of loves her. I know it's implied that the two of these characters love each other. And there are a few moments where they try that, but just they have... There's no scene for them to explore that, where it just feels like they have no romantic or sexual chemistry throughout. In fact, the few times that they do have that kind of romantic back and forth, it just kind of falls on simple platitudes, or it's internal monologue that they're not sharing with each other. That's just the love angle isn't there. Okay, but that might not matter for some people, because the film branded itself as an action comedy, so can it deliver on the action and the comedy? Well, on the action, it kind of can. There are some good moments of brutality and then kicks and punches here and there, but the film never really builds up to them. They just kind of happen inexplicably, because there is that moment where, like, you know, if you've watched the trailers, you know that, you know, Marvin is gonna like reactivate his hitman self after being, you know, beaten up by these hitmen who come after him. So you're kind of like waiting for that moment where, you know, there's that moment of shock, that surprise where Marvin is kind of like snapped out of like his enjoyable life and realizes that his hitman past is coming back to haunt him. But it just arrives abruptly, and it's just like, oh, okay, I guess, you know, we're going away from like the, you know, suburban dysfunction comedy for a moment here, to have this absurd action scene where Marvin is attacking this hitman in his office. Not bad, but then, you know, then the film just kind of like struggles to find something to do. Like it mostly just tries to find ways to get to the next fight sequence. Which, to the film's credit, the fight sequences are a little bit creative. I like the way that like Huy Quan, you know, embodies a little bit of Jackie Chan by using like pencils and cookie cutters and, you know, stuff you can find around the kitchen, and just all manner of material to use as weapons, where the fight scenes on their own are pretty good. In fact, if you mash them up, it would probably be a better movie than this. Because a lot of like the comedy moments, when it's not just like the slapstick going on, they don't really hit. And I think that's just because there's this unwillingness to kind of build up the characters as anything more than jokes. Like there are some other like subplots throughout. Like one assassin who comes after Marvin wields knives, and he kind of forms a little bit of a bond with Marvin's assistant. And there are these other two hitmen where one of them is married and he's having marital issues. He's trying to work that out over the phone. And you would think, okay, like it almost kind of feels like they're kind of trying to stage like a little bit of like a Love Actually with like action sequences here. But it really isn't that. It really just feels like we're trying to find jokes in between so that we can, you know, get to like the next big fight sequence, so that when Daniel Wu arrives, who, you know, plays Marvin's brother, they can have like this big showdown where they fight each other. But by the time you get to that showdown, we've spent so little time getting to know and like these characters that I really didn't care about whether or not you know, Marvin would win his big fight with his brother Alvin, or Knuckles, who's like a member of this gang who apparently this film takes place in Milwaukee, and it's this this Milwaukee gang led by Daniel Wu, who he doesn't really have any personality. The only personality that he has is that he drinks boba tea and that he stabs people with his straw. And that's about it. I wish I could say there's more. There isn't. That's his whole character. He drinks boba tea and he stabs people with like the big straw. That's about it. Like the film is so lazily written with like these characters, to the point. Here's how bad the writing is. Sean Astin shows up in this film. And Sean Astin, like, you know, this is an actor who's known for roles where he dies. And even this film outright admits, like, you know, oh, it has his character pretty much say, look, oh, I see what's going on here. I'm getting confronted by these hitmen. I'm probably going to die. Yep, that's what happens. And it's like, you can see the joke there. You can see there's almost a joke there. There's almost something funny there. They just have to find a little bit more creativity. They got to bring it home instead of just focusing on the violence and getting to the next fight scene. But they don't. And even worse than, you know, not landing any of the jokes is that they don't even try with the romance here. But like, because, you know, like Rose is more the chaotic one, and Marvin's a little bit of, you know, cautious about trying to put his hitman life behind him. And they don't really have any moment to connect. In fact, there's a perfect moment where, like, you know, they're hiding out and they have a down moment, and Rose goes off to shower. And you think, okay, this has got to be the moment. This has got to be the scene where either, you know, Marvin walks in on her, or, you know, he thinks about joining her in the shower. There some sexual tension, any at this point. Like, even just a bit of a glance at that point would have been something. And it's not there. And it's like all these characters just become, you know, like they don't even feel like people. They just feel like, you know, vehicles for getting, like, just players in this video game of like the next action sequence where they throw knives at each other and shoot at each other and punch and kick and stab with straws and weapons and whatever they can find. And and I just don't care about it. I don't even, like, here's how bad this film is. There's also an overarching plot about stolen money that you entirely forget about, that by the time the film gets to the end, there's this big raid from these higher up gangsters. Like, wait, where did they, oh, right, there was something to do with money about being stolen, but it was, this film, it feels very much like a rough draft. It feels like they had an idea on paper, but it wasn't fleshed out enough, and they rushed it into production, and, you know, they tried to force in jokes, and they didn't try with the romance, and it's just, I'm glad at least by the end scene at the very end of the film that Marvin says that he loves Rose, because barely anything else in the film makes it clear that these two are in a relationship, you know. So yeah, this is Love Hurts is an action comedy that tries to triple as a romance, but forgets to add in the romance, and it just ends up as hollow as like those little candy hearts where they have, like, you know, very basic declarations of love, and then you taste it, and it's just, it tastes off. It's very much an off action film that, you know, it needed some extra work on it, because it's just it's not working, and Huy Quan deserves so much better than a half-thought movie like this. Maybe even a quarter-thought movie. So yeah, Love Hurts is currently playing in theaters right now. If you want, you can go to it just for the action. And I mean, it's a short film. I think it's like under 90 minutes long, which I can't help but wonder if that played a role in hurting that film. Because it feels like the romance is entirely left on the cutting room floor, you know? All right, a little bit of the chat here. Scorn says, I was tossing up between Love Hurts or Hard Eyes. I will say this. I have not seen Hard Eyes, and I'm going to tell you right now, go see Hard Eyes. I have heard nothing but good things about Hard Eyes, and it looks great. I'm looking forward to it. But yeah, I think you're good avoiding. I think you're good avoiding Love Hurts and just going with Hard Eyes instead. I would even go so far as recommending Captain America over Love Hurts, and I didn't really like that film either. So that's how bad it is. Can't believe they are two Oscar winners. Well, I mean, is that really so unbelievable? I mean, that usually happens, like, you know, when you know, there's an Oscar winner, and then like the very next film they do, like, you know, after they won the Oscar, like, okay, what are they gonna do next? And then it turns out to be a pretty bad film. Like, I mean, that happened with Halle Berry after winning. Was it for like Monsters Ball? I think she won, and then what did she do after that? She did Catwoman. So yeah, and same thing happened for Jamie Foxx. Jamie Foxx won the Oscar for Ray way back in 2004, and what does he do after that? Stealth, a ridiculously dumb aerial combat film called Stealth. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about that too much. In fact, I would say that is actually a rite of passage. That it always happens. You win an Oscar, you get more acting opportunities, and you end up, you know, on like a pretty terrible film. So that's the way it goes, you know. True. And Swordfish. Yeah, Swordfish is, I don't quite say Swordfish is trash, but it is dumb. It is very good. Once you start thinking about the thriller aspects of that film, it is very dumb. But it's dumb. It's a guilty, I would almost say it's a guilty pleasure film for me. It's a trashy film that I love. So. Joaquin Phoenix, yeah, won Oscar for Joker. Did Joker too. At least with like Phoenix, he's willing to experiment with more stuff. Like, I love the fact that he did Beau is Afraid, which is daring. Like that's the type of film I would love to see him do. So. I would love to see him do more films like that. Okay, what do we got next? Oh, we got Grafted. All right, let's go to a smaller film now, debuting on Shudder. All right, here we go with Shudder in 3, 2... not Shudder. Grafted. Shudder is the streaming service. All right, here we go with Grafted in 3, 2, 1. So, Grafted is a body horror film all about a woman who doesn't really feel comfortable in her own skin and decides to literally take the skin of others and adapt it to her own, kind of becoming a chameleon character. Now, that's actually a pretty good idea for a body horror film. You know, it's very much akin to The Substance, but if you're hoping for something as socially compelling as The Substance, you're not going to find it here. In fact, the way that I've described Grafted is that it's a subpar The Substance, basically. So the film is all about Wei, played by Jonia Soon, who is a Chinese woman who's fascinated by science, and she grew up with her father being a scientist, and he was experimenting with trying to create a skin that would heal and graft, basically like heal somebody, and it works, but it works a little too well. Like, he tries it on himself, and it does heal the scar on his face, but then it starts healing his mouth. And it starts healing over all his orifices and covering up everything. That in order to breathe, he has to keep cutting his mouth open, but then the skin keeps regrowing over it. So that the young Wei who witnesses this is constantly stabbing her father's mouth open to keep him alive and breathing. And it's very bloody, very gross. And I thought, okay, you know what? We're off to a good start. This is actually pretty good. Let's see where this goes. And it does go to a little bit of an interesting place, because Wei, when she gets old enough to attend a college, she ends up moving to New Zealand with her aunt, and she starts studying. And a professor takes note of her work, and he starts noticing, oh, you actually got some good ideas here. Let's explore that. But then Wei just feels the weight of all the social pressure, all the social pressures of getting used to all of her peers, and then the professor being like a greedy guy who sleeps with women and sleeps with his students rather, and steals the work of Wei for his own gain. That she just feels like everybody is against her, and she doesn't want to be herself and prove herself to her dad. So it's basically, from that point on, she just starts like slaughtering people and taking on their lives, finding herself growing jealous of others, saying like, oh, that your skin looks really good. She basically starts looking at skin the way that she looks at like clothes at a shopping boutique. She's like, oh, I'd really like that. And so she finds a way to murder them and start using her formula to graft the skin onto her face. Now, to the film's credit, there are some really good gore moments. I love the scenes where like she's cutting off the skin and peeling it off, and how she tears off faces and literally pushes them up on her own face, and then the graft doesn't quite work as well, so like her face comes peeling off, and there's blood and goo and gore, and it's like, okay, that's pretty good. I'm digging on the effects here. But in terms of like the social horror angle, the characters are all kind of running on default settings here. Like, there's never much momentum built up with the characters. Like, we immediately know who these characters are. Like the aunt's daughter is this stuck-up popular girl who doesn't like the fact that Wei speaks English. That Wei speaks Chinese, because she's more used to English, and she's always down on Wei, so Wei is just like, man, I want your life, I'm gonna take it. Then she sees a popular girl, looks beautiful, and she attracts all the guys, and she attracts the professor. She's like, oh, okay, I'll take that life as well. And just keeps building from that, and we never even build that much with Wei. It feels like there's more growth in terms of like, what skin she wants to put on herself rather than her desires. Like, because very early on, they establish her as someone who just wants to prove herself to her father and kind of make this formula work and kind of like rise up and like ascend to be someone better. And then it just becomes like a mash of just like, standard character tropes, so that we can get to like the next bloody and gory sequence, which, mind you, they're decently gory and gooey, but compared to like the Substance, this film just doesn't put the work into making you care about the characters or their plight. It just feels like it's going through the motions and just stitching together this body horror with the social angle and never quite making it mesh. You can see the stitches everywhere here, and not in like the gross out, thrilling way, the way that this film stages it here. Which is pretty sad, because I think there is a good idea here that can better complement the effective special effects here, but it never quite goes the extra mile, and it just reduces character, like especially like the professor character. I expected him to be much more like, sinister and greasy and greedy, the same way that like Dennis Quaid's character was in The Substance. And it never quite goes that far. Like they say, okay, yeah, he's disgusting. He sleeps with students. He steals material. He drinks a lot, and he tests out drugs on himself, and nothing much more than that. And I kept waiting for okay, like the effects in this film are gross, but I kept waiting for those characters to go more over the top, because if you're not going to build on them, if you're not going to have like a progressive development of character, just make them cartoonish. Just go further over the top. Make this, professor like greasy and weird and gross, and make the stuck-up popular girls like, so cynical and, like just spit on people and just, horrible to Wei. Just make her plight feel something more, instead of just, Wei wanting to cut people's faces off out of boredom. Because that kind of feels what it is. It just feels like an excuse for Wei to cut up some faces and graft them onto herself. Where it feels like they kind of put the cart before the horse here, where it was more about the special effects than it was about the social horror. So yeah, Grafted is currently playing on Shudder if you want to check it out. I would say it's a good film to check out to see, like, if you like the substance, like that's a good film to check out to get a good idea of, what can happen if you don't put in the extra work and go more over the top like the substance did. Because Grafted just kind of feels like, okay, I see what they're doing here. I don't think they're building it high enough, but yeah, it's a sub part of the substance. Scorn says, guess the main character of Grafted channeled Nick Cage taking the face off. Yeah, I see what you did there. Not bad. Okay. Alright, we got one last film here, and we need to end on a high note, because I wasn't even planning to cover this to cover this film quite yet. I was kind of saving it more for like Oscar night, but you know what? After looking at all the bad films we reviewed, let's take a look at something. Just recommend something just a little more pleasing. Alright, so here's a review of Flow in 3, 2, 1. So Flow is an animated Latvian film that is all about a collection of animals who struggle to survive when the earth floods. And the animal ensemble is made up of a cat, a dog, a Labrador Retriever, a capybara, a secretary bird, and a ringed-tailed lemur. Now, you might be thinking, okay, well, what's going to happen on this adventure? It's like, is one of them going to wisecrack? Who's the voice cast here? What caused the Earth to flood? What is going to, what did humans do? Did the humans all get killed off? Did they get reunited with the humans? Well, forget all that, because there are no voice actors. None of the animals speak. In fact, the animals in this film just act like animals. Like, it's pretty much a silent film for how it stages these animal characters just trying to struggle to survive when their planet is flooded. They do imply that, because there are houses, that there might have been some humans at one point, but they might have fled. We never really get a backstory, and honestly, we don't need a backstory, because all you need to know is that the planet's flooding, and these animals have to try to find a way to survive. The main character that we do follow, though, is the dark gray cat, who was initially living in a home, but then, realized the waters were rising, and so she hooks up on a boat, with a capybara on board. And the capybara is a little bit more capable, and then later we get the Labrador Retriever, who's a little bit more reactive, a little bit more like comic relief, and then you get the ring-tailed lemur, which is a bit more of a bit more of like a greedy character. Like, the lemur just wants to preserve all his little trinkets, like dishes, and primarily a mirror for looking at his own reflection. And then you have a secretary bird who kind of acts as kind of like it's like a villain turned hero almost, in the fact that the secretary bird could just eat some of these characters or attack them, and chooses not to. And there are some pretty good arcs for these animals that never really speak in any known language, other than just their animal their animal languages, more or less. Don't worry, there's no like subtitles or anything like that for what they're saying here. Everything is implied by their actions, and you can read all their actions pretty well here. Like, and they do have some pretty good arcs. I love the fact that, you know, the lemur's a bit crestfallen about losing all his trinkets, and at first you're kind of like, okay, that he's just a greedy character who needs to, you know, abandon materialism, but at the same time, there's some heartbreak for when he experiences that loss. The secretary bird has a pretty, in fact, the secretary bird has probably the most interesting arc of kind of, you know, being rejected by the other birds and then trying to find some meaning to its own life, and eventually going to like this weird kind of like this almost kind of like unexplained ascension that almost kind of feels like something a little bit out of like a David Lynch film in the way that it's not fully explained. And that's kind of what I love about the film. Like, it's mostly just like a straightforward adventure, but is willing to go into some odd places and never reduce it, I think, by explaining too much of it. It mostly just feels like the animals are kind of going with the flow, and you're with them in this state of just, you know, going along with their primal instincts of trying to find a way to survive and trying to find, you know, some meaning in this world that is flooded. Now, there is a happy ending to it, but I wouldn't even quite say it's a happy ending. I'd say it's like more of like a bittersweet ending that forces the characters to kind of contemplate the world that they have to end up living within. But I love that. I love, because like for when I got through like the first act and the second act, like, okay, you know, this film's actually pretty good. You know, I'm digging the visuals. I love the kind of the computer animation they're using here with Blender that kind of meshes this kind of like illustrative style, while at the same time, you know, having like this realistic motion and movement to the characters and all like the reflectiveness of the water and the specularity. I love all that little detail there. So the first two acts, pretty good. And then we get to the third act, and it goes into some wilder places that I did not expect, and did some things with the characters that I didn't expect as well. And yeah, for how kind of like left field it arrives, it feels very natural for like the progression of these characters, for them to take these kind of almost like mystical routes by the end of the film, and how they get separated and reunited in, like I said, in a very bittersweet way. Now, the animation for this, like I said, made by Blender, it looks gorgeous. Like, there's no other film that looks like this, and that plays like this as well. Like, I mean, a silent film with animated characters like this just feels like, you know, you could only do this with like, you know, a small art project. And I think, you know, one of the benefits, you know, the fact that like Blender is a free program, that the big animation team that were able to do this, led by Gintz Zalbados, I think I pronounced Gintz Zalbados, is just fascinating. It's just like it dazzles the eyes, and I think, you know, just the way that they have such faith with the characters here, to just like allow like the most natural of animal movements, which it felt like they spent a lot of time just trying to nail that, because it feels like that would be like the trickiest aspect, because it's easy to make anthropomorphic animals and like, you know, exaggerate them a bit here and there, but to make animals behave naturally while still maintaining this kind of illustrative cartoony style, I think creates this very like surreal aspect to the film. That just feels like such an odd dream that is unique to get lost within, with all like its sadness and its little joys here and there, and its greater contemplation about our planet, and the existentialism that one, you know, feels with just, you know, trying to like live another day when like the world seems chaotic, and just try to keep going on. It's just, there's so much that gets touched on here without uttering a single human word, and I think that's what makes Flow just such like a beautiful and an intelligent film. Like, just the look of it alone is beautiful, but the fact that it has faith to kind of tell this adventure without dialogue, or without like, you know, some easy resolve or simple explanation, just makes Flow such a brilliant animated film. So yeah, it's actually good timing that I talk about Flow today, because I found out that it's actually going to be debuting on Max, the Max streaming service, this Friday. So if you want to check out Flow yet, I do believe it is up for digital download. You can watch it on like Amazon or iTunes, but if you can wait a bit, It's going to be streaming on Max this weekend, so be sure to watch it. It's nominated for the Academy Award for Best Animated Film, and normally, any other year with any other film, from any other people who are making it, I would say it doesn't have a chance. But this year, Flow has actually been winning quite a few awards. I think it might have a shot at winning Best Animated Feature. I think its biggest competition is The Wild Robot. At this point, it's between The Wild Robot and Flow. So I think it's going to matter how willing the voters are going to be for a silent animal adventure film rather than one with like lots of dialogue. As good as The Wild Robot is, it's going to be a tough call there. So, but yes, Flow is good. And if you haven't seen it yet, see it this Friday. Go check it out. All right, so there, we ended on a little bit of a high note, huh? All right. So, let's take a quick review of the films we reviewed on today's stream. I reviewed Captain America: Brave New World, a film that tries to be a political thriller, but has a lot, but for how much it has going on, it doesn't really live up to being the same level of a political thriller that Captain America: Civil War or Captain America: The Winter Soldier was. So yeah, it's definitely one of the worst Captain America films for being rather toothless with its politics. I also reviewed Love Hurts, a new action film starring Huy Quan. It tries with its action and comedy, but it doesn't really find a good flow, and it doesn't even try with its romance. Big disappointment there. I also reviewed Grafted, a body horror film about a woman who tries to prove herself and adopt a new life, and it does have some good gore effects, but it doesn't really try that much with its social horror angle, where it feels like a subpar version of The Substance. And I reviewed Flow, a beautiful and contemplative animated animal adventure film without a single single dialogue of the human language coming through this film. And it's a beautiful, gorgeous film to watch, and just letting the animal characters act like animals. It's a Latvian animated film. It's up for Best Animated Film, and I think it does have a good shot this year. It's streaming on Max, and that is the film among all 4 films on the stream that I would recommend that you go see. All right. So if you want to look at written reviews of all the films I talked about here, you can find them on my website at movieswithmark.com. If you check the description, you can actually find a link to my Patreon. And I'm talking about my Patreon today because I have just finished my book on Saturday morning cartoons, the history of Saturday morning cartoons. The book is done. I'm finishing up on the cover. It will definitely be out by next week. So if you would like to get a copy, and a cheaper copy, mind you, you can sign up over on my Patreon on the $15 tier, and once the book is ready, I will send out copies the moment that it is ready for print. And the fact that, and the reason I'm recommending the $15 tier is that that's the tier that gets physical copies of my books, and this book is going to be over $20. So if you sign up on Patreon, you're going to get a $5 value if you do it through there. Not to mention, actually, it's going to be a little bit more than that, because I'm going to give out the digital copies of the book as well. So yeah, be sure to check that out. So I will say, I was initially, instead of Grafted, I was going to review Paddington in Peru, but unfortunately weather problems forced me to cancel that screening. So next week, I'm going to try to get around to that next week. So next week, we will be reviewing Paddington in Peru, and we will also be reviewing Stephen King's The Monkey. And I have seen that one already, and I'm very excited to talk about that film, but they asked us to hold off on coverage for next week. But I will say this, pretty funny. It's a pretty funny film. So there's a little preview. So yeah, be sure to tune in next week for reviews of Paddington in Peru and The Monkey, 2 wildly different animal films, kinda. But yeah, if you like more early reviews like Captain America: Brave New World, be sure to like this video and subscribe to keep up to date on the latest movies. So thank you so much for Sucked and Scorn for stopping by and catching up on the latest movies. I will get the reviews of Captain America and Love Hurts, and I think probably Grafted up this week, sometime this week. So yeah, more reviews to look forward to. So yeah, and until next time, have a good one, everybody. Oh, and happy Valentine's Day. Special gifts there.